Welcome back to PLR, Providence Leftist Radio, where we seek to unite a network of leftists in the area so that we can one day win local power. I am Evan, and you know what that means. This is a movie episode, yes, but I am joined by Alex Van Helsing, resident horror nerd, to help me with this episode. Which is going to be all about vampire movies. I think vampire movies, something that most of us have seen at least a little bit. Whether it's like a big mainstream blockbuster hit kind of thing or one of the more obscure vampire movies. But,
if you haven't seen Blade, you fucking up.
That's true. I can confirm that. Let me just 2 words, blood rave. Anyway, we have spent a lot of time just over the course of our relationship. We've watched a lot of horror movies together, but we've spent a lot of time recently going deeper, specifically into vampire movies, because Alex pointed out the metaphor that is actually used by Marx himself. What text was that in?
Marx uses a metaphor of vampire in actually a lot of texts. So he uses it in Capital, he uses it in the Grundrisse again, and he uses it also in my favorite piece, which is the 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon. I have the quotes if you'd like me to read them.
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Remember, kids, I don't read.
The quote in Capital is pretty self-explanatory. It says, "Capital is dead labor, which vampire-like lives only by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks."
Okay, so let's break that down. We are looking... The comparison here is between vampires and bosses, the bourgeoisie, people who are in charge of the workers, literally sucking the life force out of you via your labor.
That's the common way. I mean, that's the orthodox Marxist way of studying these things. There's another way. I mean, there have been some scholars that have written about ways to interpret how Marx uses the vampire metaphor. And, they all basically are saying the same thing, that there is this binary between labor and capitalists. Some people take this quote and they break it down to say that capital is dead labor. And so they focus more on the idea that, well, if capital is dead labor, then living labor must be workers. That this is where the vampire aspect of it comes from, that in that case, in order to live, the vampire, aka the capitalist, must suck life from the living laborer. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. You have more quotes?
Yeah, there's also, so the metaphor itself is sort of, it's repeated in the same one. I'll give you the quote from the Grundrisse too, because I think it's along similar lines. It says, "The bourgeois order, which at the beginning of the century set the state to stand guard over the newly arisen small holding and manured it with laurels, has become a vampire that sucks out its blood and marrow and throws them into the alchemistic cauldron of capital." So in this metaphor, he's actually talking about land. In the Grundrisse, he's talking about how capitalists can suck resources as well as labor from land, mm-hmm. kind of chew it up and spit it back out into nothing, right? So you think of fossil fuels, maybe, let's think of that. We extract fossil fuels from the ground, mm-hmm. we consume them, and we spit them back out as carbon into the atmosphere that becomes dead, right? Mm-hmm. The carbon, in a sense, comes dead. But I thought it's interesting, historically speaking, Marx is writing about vampires in the 1860s, but the image of the vampire is older than Marx. Of course, Marx isn't the first one to write it. Alexei Tolstoy in Russia wrote two stories in the 1830s, The Family of the Vampire and Bloodsuckers, I think is the name of the other one. And there's other like small stories from Eastern Europe that come out about these bloodsuckers. And essentially most of the early ones before Bram Stoker's Dracula movie are women, which I think sets us up. So now we have both the vampire as capital, as a bourgeois person, and then we also have the vampire as a woman. So we're starting to see how the vampire itself isn't just the monster of horror lore, but it's also meant to depict something or represent something in even this 19th century world.
Yeah, I mean, vampires, or like conceptually, maybe they aren't called vampires across the board, but these kind of creatures exist in lore across cultures. For a long time. They're ancient stories. You know, they've got like similar traits that we can kind of ascribe to them, like cold, their cold bodies. They might have some special kind of powers of some kind, mind control kind of stuff. They're night people of the night, creatures of the night. Don't go out in the daytime unless you're Blade. Again, watch Blade.
The mirror thing is another one. But what movie was it where, I mean, to speak to the point that like the idea of a vampire, of a bloodsucker, isn't just European. I think it was Twilight, where they had this person from South America that was like supposed to be. Do you remember that in the last scene where I think it was Brazil. So Edward took, what's her name, Bella, to Brazil, and then they rode out to that island where the lady who was essentially their house servant knew that Edward was a vampire, suspected him of being a vampire. But then at the end of the series, there's like this weird scene where this indigenous half vampire, this Brazilian, well, he's not Brazilian, but he's indigenous of the region that is Brazil, comes out, and he's just like, out of nowhere, he's like, I am half vampire too.
Right. He was the precedent for what they needed to find to save a current day situation. But so these stories go back for a long time, to before the time of movies. But there have been vampire movies for years and years and years and years and years, decades. I watched one the other night. I don't know. So if it's with a Y, is it pronounced vampire?
Vampire.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, this was a German language film from 1932. So that was old as hell and contained a lot of the same themes. So you can kind of across the board, you can look at a ton of different vampire things, or even if you just like sit down and off the top of your head try to figure out stuff about vampires, it's like, yeah, okay, they suck blood, they're pale, can't hang in the daylight. Some of them can turn into bats, or they're like associated with bats or sometimes wolves. What else do we got?
They transform, right? The point, I guess, being that vampires are not exclusively a European thing, but in popular culture, they have become such a cinematic creature because of Euro-American focused films. And so even before 1930, in the 1920s, I believe it's the 20s, you had Nosferatu first, which is the term itself is referring to one of the European, I believe, German terms for vampire, that is stretching back to vampiric lore. And then, as you said, in the 1930s, you have the first that I know of Hollywood kind of classical cinema depiction of Dracula, and that's just called Dracula. That's 1931, I believe. And then there's the German film that you just mentioned, Vampire, which comes out. But there's no mistake that as film is kind of becoming a thing, as movies are becoming popular, and people are seeking to make a profit off of movies, the vampire is kind of the first major monster to really make the big screen. And I think that has to do with what we're talking about here, which is that whether it's a bougie white guy that lives alone in a castle, or it's what else is there? Bougie white people that live alone in a mansion and play piano, as in The Hunger, and they do gay things together with other people, or whoever it is, it's always that other. And the vampire, I think, the image of the vampire is just so easy for us to be afraid of.
I mean, it's pretty freaky if you think about it, right? Like, the undead, I mean, I guess you can kill a vampire, you know that by now about the stakes, but just the thought of somebody coming back, and so there's actually not that same kind of finality, or like that safe feeling of finality is gone. And also I think it's a big deal that vampires sort of like live among humans in a lot of these stories. So sometimes they're hidden away in their mansions or whatever, but sometimes they're just like out blending in with the human race, and they're undetectable by most people unless you're paying extra close attention. Like, that's pretty freaky to think about, that like somebody can just get you at any moment.
Get you.
Yeah.
And particularly the story of Dracula, Bram Stoker's original Dracula, but also the film Bram Stoker's Dracula, which to my mind is probably the closest thing to the book in terms of depiction. But the point being there that's the classic depiction of a bourgeois vampire, right? He's like this guy that lives in a castle. He's been there for years. He used to be an aristocrat. Actually, the whole beginning of the film sets up this image of him as a ancient Hungarian warrior, and then it shows him walking through the streets of London and stuff like that, and he's dressed to the nines and like his get up and his Elton John glasses.
Oh my God, Gary Oldman's glasses. Is that him?
Yeah,
Gary Oldman's glasses are so cool in that movie. His whole outfit is so cool in that movie.
Yeah, I'm jealous of it. But so this is something that we talked about too while we were watching the most common depictions of vampires as middle-aged white middle-class men, right? Is that it kind of, because their victims tend to be women all the time, their first victims in all of these films in which the vampire is a white, middle-aged, middle-income man, the first victim is always a woman. First of all, that's the case also in Bram Stoker's original story, and it might, to my mind, the fact that was there in the 19th century kind of speaks to the place of women as susceptible, as deviant, as prone to, what's the word, adultery? Because that's the reason why they fall for the vampire, right? Is because they're tempted in quotes, tempted by the white guy that's rich, that lives in a castle, and so they commit adultery against their lover, who is usually set up as the main protagonist of the film. In Stoker's story, it's Jonathan, and Jonathan has to
Keanu Reeves.
Yes, it's Keanu Reeves. He has to save his wife, or to-be wife, from getting tricked by this rich guy that lives in a castle.
Yeah, the vampires are often these kind of charismatic leaders, fuckboys, if you will.
The first fuckboys.
The original suckboys.
Yeah, the original. Yeah, and it's absolutely true because if you think of other early monsters like Frankenstein, he's not a fuck boy. He's just a fuck body. He's just like he got that big Franken dick, and like
Oh
that's
my
it. That's
god.
all you get for Frankenstein. But with Dracula, you get eternal life. You get to live in a castle. You remember that scene in Bram Stoker's Dracula when Dracula's wives come and
Hell yeah.
they start like sucking on Keanu Reeves' nipples and stuff.
Yeah, so that's part of the original story is the multiple wives.
There's actually a movie called The Wives of Dracula
I
too.
know. It's on my list.
And then there's that part where where Dracula comes in, he's like, "Get the fuck out of here," right? Because no one is supposed to have his women except for him. So he's like the possessive, controlling, bourgeois white guy that he can torture Jonathan. He can have him laid out in his castle for months, just sucking his blood every night and feeding him, I don't know, giblets or whatever the heck he was eating.
What is a giblet?
I don't know. I made that up. I just think of that as like the waste from poultry.
Oh, I wouldn't know. Sorry.
That's what. It might be giblet. I don't know, something like that. But anyway, the
Niblet is what Spike, the vampire from Buffy, used to call Dawn. That was his nickname for her. Niblet, isn't that?
Because he
something?
nibbles.
Spike was okay. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Because he nibbles, is that why?
I don't know. Anyway.
But this example of like the bougie white guy, I wanted to start with that because that's really like Bram Stoker's Dracula really changed the image of the vampire from being particularly women. It used to be in the early 19th century, women were vampires because they were the ones that were looked at as sexual deviants. And so men, primarily men, European men, were writing about succubi pretty much, but vampires themselves because they were afraid of, I don't know, their wife doing something that they didn't want them to do. But Bram Stoker changes this story as well as, I think, Marx, because when we think of like bougie vampires and the way Marx says it, I think of white dudes. I don't really think of white capitalist women. I think of a white guy. I think of Dracula in Bram Stoker's Dracula, or the Dracula or the vampire from Fright Night, the first one, right? The guy with the pop collar and the suave hair.
Chris Sarandon.
He's got like gold necklace and stuff like that. Those are the people that I think of when I think of the vampire in the classical sense.
So let's talk for a minute about other depictions of vampires, like throughout pop culture and history. We watched, probably close to about 20 different vampire movies, but there are tons. I mean, there are just so many. And there's so many that I'd still like to watch. I'm not going to not watch them just because we are done with recording this episode. But, I mean, from like the Count on Sesame Street, I don't know what class he's in, but he's purple.
Oh, damn, I forgot about him.
Why do they call him a count? He just be counting his money.
Yeah, he's definitely a bougie count.
1, 2, 3. He's just counting his dollars.
Damn, that's a good point. Who is it? What's the name of the dude that created Sesame Street? I forget his name.
Man, I don't know.
No, he's got a famous name. You'd know it if I brought it up.
Are you talking about Jim Henson? That's the Muppets.
Yeah, but then he started, Sesame Street and Muppets started together, I think. And then they split off.
That's a different episode. I don't know. You'll have to do that one. But let's talk about different depictions of vampires. We watched, you mentioned it, so we'll go with The Hunger, starring David Bowie. Awesome. Susan Sarandon and Catherine Deneuve. It's a bit of a love triangle, a little bit of a queer love triangle movie. So that's something different. There's Vamp, which is the Grace Jones one. Grace Jones, another queer icon, and Blackity Black Black Black. You've got Dracula's Son, which is the one with all the musical stars. Remember that one?
Yeah, that one is that one is definitely a stand. Dracula's son in that film does not suck anybody's blood. There's like one point when he looks at the camera, he's just like, and then that's it. And then the rest of the movie is like him struggling with the fact that he's immortal, but all he wants to do is jam. And so it's literally just like every famous musician that you've ever heard of, from rock in the late 70s, just jamming out with Dracula's son, not Dracula.
Maybe he's trying to rebel against his dad.
Yeah, that's
Is that it?
Yeah, that pretty much is what it is. If you think of like the hippie generation, right? Most of them were. This is my reading of it. If you think of the hippie generation, most of them were from middle class families, in which they were Dracula's son, right? And so let's play rock and roll and do drugs and fucking not suck blood.
Well, and that brings up the point of the vampire as the other. We have noticed this a lot in movies. And when I say the other, I sort of mean just like going against the status quo, I suppose. But and so I don't know. Think about the Lost Boys, where all the vampires were kind of these like. Sorry, that was my dog. Like ratty punks on motorcycles, like counterculture vampires. You know.
Yeah, that movie is another one of those that. Again, I just saw it as. The kids rebelling against their family and what their parents had done, their parents' generation. Although this one is in the late 80s rather than the 70s, but yeah.
We also watched Only Lovers Left Alive. That's just one of my favorite movies in general. It's a Jim Jarmusch joint. It's very like indie. Lot of referential humor, which I enjoy, but may not be suitable for everyone. It's got Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston. What's his name? Hiddleston. The guy who plays Loki in the Thor movies.
Yeah.
Hiddleston. And the late great Anton Yelchin. So it's a modern take on vampires. But it sort of also brings up this notion of the ethical vampire, the vampire that doesn't murder humans. And so...
Blade is another ethical... Did you say Blade?
I haven't said Blade yet. That's like a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
We'll get there. But yeah, so there are a couple of different representations of the ethical vampire, but I do recommend Only Lovers Left Alive. If for nothing else, I really like the music. But what else we got? Blood of the Vampire. Of course, Interview with a Vampire. I'm from Louisiana, so that one was important to me.
New Orleans.
If you say New Orleans again, I'm going to kill you.
That wasn't me. That was, what's his name? He kept saying New Orleans in that movie.
Man.
No one got it right.
I blame Janis Joplin.
Really?
Huh?
Really? What did Janis Joplin do?
In the song, Me and Bobby McGee. Busted a flat in Baton Rouge, waiting for the train, feeling near as faded as my jeans. And then to rhyme with jeans, she says, we flagged a diesel down, rode it all the way to New Orleans.
All right, yeah. All right, yeah. It's Janis Joplin.
And now you know that I know all the words to that song.
Yes, now we all know.
You've got What We Do in the Shadows, which is both a movie and a series from New Zealand Kiwi creators, which is so hilarious. I've been really enjoying the show. And that, because it's different generations of vampires, that you do really get a nice like class analysis going on in there. And they also really emphasize the role of the familiar, the vampire's familiar, which is sort of like a bootlegger, I guess you could say. It's like, if a vampire is the boss who's exploiting your labor, then the familiar is the person who's just like apologizing for it, and he's like, it's fine, plus they're gonna make me rich one day, like it's fine that they treat me like shit constantly, but like I'm gonna be a part of it one day.
Yeah, Fright Night had the original Fright Night, the vampire has a familiar, although I don't think they use that term.
I don't think they use that term. And then he's got some kind of unexplained supernatural demise. Remember?
Oh yeah, he's like a zombie at the end.
He's something or other. Yeah, okay, so there are two Fright Nights. There's the one from the 80s, and then there's a more modern one with Colin Farrell and Toni Collette.
Both of them are good.
Yeah,
I do like the older one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, and Anton Yelchin is in that one too. Oh my god, double vampire movie. Yeah, there's quite a bit of crossover. Actually, there's an episode that I just watched of What We Do in the Shadows where there's some cameos that are various vampires. So the Tilda Swinton from Only Lovers Left Alive, Evan Rachel Wood, who was in that show True Blood, which again is set in Louisiana because vampires in Louisiana is a whole thing. Paul Rubens, also known as Pee Wee Herman, he was in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie. Yes, he was in the movie. Wesley Snipes from Blade did a cameo in there. A virtual cameo. Danny Trejo from Dusk Till Dawn, which is and Machete. So from Dusk Till Dawn, if you haven't seen those movies, kind of quintessential Quentin Tarantino situation. But I actually enjoy them. And in the first one, the vampires are sex workers. They're dancers in a club.
Wait, in which one?
From Dusk Till Dawn.
Oh, all right.
Amongst others, but just the club in the middle of nowhere. I think it's called the Titty Twister. The Twister it is a club that's like for vampires, you know, and I think Selma Hayek is like the main vampire.
What year? What decade is that from?
Oh, that's not that old actually. Let me do a clicky.
There is so one of the ways to talk about these films, because
1996.
All right, that's not that old.
Sorry, Robert Rodriguez. Quentin Tarantino is in it, but Robert Rodriguez directed it. Oh, and Quentin Tarantino wrote it. Okay, never mind, I wasn't wrong.
One way to like try to understand these films, because we watch so many of them, and to like try to systematize them in how they depict vampires is there's a couple ways, right? So you can refer to the time periods in which they came out. So, for example, Vamp, Hunger, the first Fright Night. A lot of these movies came out in the 80s. So you can try to sort of think about, and they all kind of have the same depictions of vampires, right? They're all sexual. That's all I'll say.
Oh yes, there is an inherent sensuality involved.
In the 80s, vampires, like especially, they're all...
It's a sexy time.
They're all...
Everybody was on cocaine.
They're all sexual. Yeah, I mean, The Hunger, definitely. Vamp, which I don't... that was one of the first that we watched. I don't like totally recall it, but I do remember it takes place in a strip club, doesn't it? Yeah, it takes place in a strip club. And then Fright Night, like we just said, the guy is just kind of like suave as hell and good looking. And the cool thing about the new one is that they do play with that a lot, like with what's his name?
Colin Farrell, who is hot.
Yeah, they play. His character, who is the vampire, plays with that like sexual aspect of it a lot.
There's also there's that, and there's that's also in the Lost Boys and Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire Disney movie. There's the whole vampire seducing my mother trope.
Yes, I guess seduction.
My stepdad is a vampire.
Seduction, I guess, is the right word to like capture all of these, in a sense. Maybe except for the Lost Boys, which
he doesn't necessarily seduce her, but they do start going on dates. There
is love in the Lost Boys, but for me, my reading of the Lost Boys is that it's like the classic 80s punk story, right, of the kids rebelling against their parents, but they just added the vampire aspect to it, that like your parents who were hippies ignored you as children because you were a mistake, and so now we're going to grow up and we're going to be Lost Boys. We're a lost generation, right? Gen X is the lost generation. And we're going to become vampires and do fuck all, and then save you at the end of it somehow. We'll figure this out. It's kind of like Goonies, right? Goonies has the same idea, the same actors too, of like kids figuring it out for themselves. That's what it's all about, because the parents aren't there. The parents are vampires, or they don't really care that much, except for the grandfather in Lost Boys. The grandfather who like represents the generation before the boomers, I guess the greatest generation they call it, the World War II generation. He's been there, you know what I mean? Like at the end, he's like, one thing I hate about this town is all them damn vampires. And you're supposed to be like, oh shit, Grandpa, you knew all along. Like, goddamn. But, yeah, so like those 80s films for me, that's what the vampire is used as the other to depict, like that generational other, that sexual other, or of course always that class other, because God forbid there's a working class vampire in any Hollywood films. Never happens. Not to my mind, at least.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's just because they live forever, so they have enough time to kind of acquire skills and capital, so that by the time we meet them, they have placed out of the working class, or I don't know. We haven't seen, yes, you're right, we haven't seen too many vampires that like look like us or represent us. And Queen of the Damned, which is sort of like an unofficial sequel to Interview with the Vampire, because it's Lestat.
Same writer of the original books.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like a 6-part series of like Lestat's life, and Queen of the Damned is one of them, as is Interview with the Vampire.
All right, well, Queen of the Damned, I think for most of us who haven't seen it are like, oh, that's the one with Aaliyah, right? And like, yes, it definitely is. She is the Queen of the Damned, and she rocks. She does a great job. But her character is actually like pretty minimally featured on screen, and most of it is about not the black woman vampire. It is mostly about the white guy vampire, because he is the famous one, and he is the like, what is he? He's like a rock star or something. Yeah. Some kind of shitty shirtless pale.
So you remember at the end of with the first one,
Interview with the Vampire?
Interview with the Vampire, the guy's like scared out of his mind. He gets in his car, he like rides away after he just heard the story of Lestat, and then he's like driving, and all of a sudden Tom Cruise, who plays Lestat in that movie, like stands up in his car. He's like, I imagine you already know who I am, which is frightening. If Tom Cruise showed up in my house and like I looked up and it was him, and he's like, I imagine you already know who I am, I'd be like, oh shit. And then he like sucks the guy's blood, and then that's supposed to be while they're like on the highway headed to California, I think. So like, or they're already in California, I don't know. They're headed somewhere. So that's supposed to be like, you're supposed to understand that when Queen of the Damned starts, Lestat is a rock hero, and that's how it happened. He like took this guy's car and all his shit and like went and started his new life.
This guy being the interviewer, Christian Slater?
Yeah.
And that's another, so you're supposed to keep it quiet. Like, vampires living among humans is supposed to be like this big secret. And so maybe that's why Lestat went after the interviewer, because it was like an easy target, because it's like you can't know about it. And Only Lovers Left Alive, there's quite a bit of secrecy involved. One of the characters is implied to be Chris Marlowe, who historically people have said that Chris Marlowe actually wrote everything that Shakespeare got famous for. So there's a lot of that kind of reference stuff going on. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there's they live in Sunnydale, which is built on the Hellmouth. So there's like a lot of demon stuff going on. And so it's like, yeah, there are vampires, but like nobody really talks about it kind of a thing. But still they have to keep it quiet and try to protect the identity of vampires, even though they're everywhere and they're evil, most of them.
Unfortunately, my knowledge of Buffy is not that good. I watched a few episodes with you, but like the arc of the story of all the seasons in Buffy's life, I have no idea about.
I could do a whole episode just on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I know that Joss Whedon is a tool, but no, there's no but. That's it. Joss Whedon is a tool, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer has been really important to me for my whole life.
To continue on with my theme or my suggestion that like we can kind of study these films by decade. Like Buffy is the 1990s, and so is Blade, right? Mm-hmm. So, or at least the first Blade. And there's also Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola mm-hmm. movie comes out in 1992, which like I feel like Francis Ford Coppola was just trying to do an ode to those classic 1920s, 1930s Dracula films by trying to have a modern Dracula. There's also a Dracula film in the 70s. It's just called Dracula, and there's also another Nosferatu that comes
mm-hmm.
out. The 70s is sort of the decade of the remake of mm-hmm. those really old ones. So you get Dracula, you get Nosferatu comes out, except for the Son of Dracula, that fucking weird rock one, which I have no idea. That it was just an excuse for a bunch of musicians to do drugs and pretend to suck blood and be sexual or something like that.
Ringo Starr was like, I have an idea, and everyone was like, shut up.
Ringo Starr plays a wizard, which is the weirdest thing because there is no wizard in the Dracula story. So it's almost...
I'll be the wizard.
It's almost like they asked him, they were like... Well, first they asked, like, Paul, and they were like, Paul, you want to be part of this film? And he was like, no, good luck. You pay me a lot of money to do that. And then they asked Ringo, and he was like, oh my God, mate, can I be a wizard? And they were like, I guess so. I mean, if we don't have to pay you that much money, then fine.
All right, if you must.
So they just wrote Ringo's character as the wizard into the script.
One series we have not talked enough about is Twilight. We should go there because there were 4 of them. I didn't know there were 4. I thought there was 1 when I suggested it. But there were 4, and we watched all 4 of them, and we're actually able to kind of like point things out about it.
Actually, first wanted to just say about Blade and Buffy in the 90s that the vampire story there seems to be a continuation of what we were talking about with the late 80s. At least for me, it's like, with the exception of Blade, which, as we said, he's an ethical vampire. He's the first, to my knowledge, like, strong black vampire, strong independent black vampire. That's on the big screen. But, like, between him, again, it's that other being depicted as, like, an independent, badass vampire. Buffy being a woman, Blade being black. Except with the exception of Francis Ford Coppola's film in the 90s. The 2000s now... Oh, do you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to bring up the strength, the physical strength. That's one of the things that vampires tend to always have is like extreme physical strength. And so Blade, being half vampire himself, had that skill. He could walk in the day. That's why he was the Daywalker.
The Daywalker, yeah.
But he had the super strength, so he was an amazing fighter. And Buffy, though she was not a vampire, as the Slayer, which was like an equally supernatural entity, I guess, had super strength.
Could be a metaphor for sexual promiscuity of women, too. She is the Slayer. She goes around slaying vampires. Just saying. It's one way to see it.
Okay, but she's like a teenager, man.
I know, but these things still have secret meanings. And Buffy was originally a comic book, right?
Yes, and she was a teenager in the comic book.
Yeah.
Not that teenagers aren't sexual and don't have sex. Obviously they do, but...
They slaying.
Definitely
Maybe.
A weird thing for a grown man to write about the burgeoning sexuality of a teenage girl.
Grown men write about the sexuality of other people. Grown white men, let me correct that, write about the sexuality of other people habitually.
True.
Dracula is an example. I mean, Dracula has been interpreted as, like I said, a book about female promiscuity in the 19th century.
Well, in Twilight, as teens, they are like, it's very sexual, very sensual. like they're 17. Well, I mean, they look 17. I guess they're like hundreds of years old as vampires. But the main characters, Bella, who's a human at first, is like 17, 18, and they're kind of always like quivering around each other and like like breathing heavy, and like they're like smooching, and like they want to go further but they can't. And so it's kind of, I think a lot of the backlash against the books was like, this is not appropriate material for children, but it's like exactly what kids want to read about. A little bit of the like Harlequin romance, but for kids, so make it vampire.
From strictly a horror nerd perspective, and I might get a lot of backlash for this, a lot of shock, a lot of awe.
Fingers on the cancel button, friends.
I think that Twilight actually was great for what it was.
Oh, I enjoyed it.
No, not talking about the plot, but if we're talking about the depictions of vampires and what they are, and all these tropes about like speed, strength, the male gaze being a major aspect of vampires throughout history, of being the other and everything like that. Twilight sort of brought it all together, but in a teen drama. You know what I mean? And like the teen drama is the thing that most people are turned off by. Like, oh fuck, I don't want to watch some story about some little fucking high school shits. But like, I think that plot allowed them to incorporate all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, teenage girls get a bad rap just all the way across the board, and that's not fair, and I would love to support teenage girls. So I wanna give a fist bump to Bella, which I don't know, I brought this up, is her name being Bella a nod to Bela Lugosi, who was the original Dracula?
Yeah, the 1931 Dracula.
I don't know, but I'm gonna say that it is, because I like drawing connections where connections don't need to be made.
You got to think of it from the perspective of the screenwriters and director, because in my opinion, like, if you're making a vampire movie, whether it's Twilight or Francis Ford Coppola remaking Dracula, there's a whole canon of past films and past stories that you have to soak up to try to like bring to fans. Like, not only am I going to bring a love story in the case of Twilight that like non-horror fans can get into, but I also have to bring something for the horror, like the vampire fans to get into. The people who watched Buffy and at the end were like, man, I want more.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's still a movie. It still is a capitalist scheme. It wanted to market to everyone so that they would pay for it. That's why there are 4 friggin' movies. But yeah, they do bring in a lot of the tropes. We don't see much about like garlic or crosses or anything. There is a mirror scene where the vampire absolutely does have a reflection, which goes against what we, the common people, understand about vampires. But for the most part, yeah, they've got super strength, super speed. They can kind of fly. They all have like their own unique special powers too, like mind reading or mind control or like electricity or whatever. They can heal quickly, and then there's this like relationship that they have with the tribe in the Pacific Northwest where they're at, and they've got their own thing going on with being wolves. Spoiler alert.
Not to be confused with the Brazilian tribe that they
right
connect.
Right.
I'm gonna try to defend the vampiric omissions of Twilight here, the mirror thing and the garlic not being there.
I mean, I'm not attacking it.
I know, but I'm gonna try to defend it for vampire nerds who are upset that it's not there, and I'm gonna do so by saying that, again, if we go back to the depictions and how the vampire has morphed through decades, the 2000s and the 2010s, in my mind, are sort of the era of, there's Ozzy again, the era of the ironic vampire. So this is where you get what we do in the shadows, right? The kind of making fun of vampires. This is where we get Only Lovers Left Alive. That's 2013, where like, there is a lot of irony to their vampirism. They're not like horrific, scary people. They're like cool musicians that chill. And like the scariest thing that happens is like one of the characters gets his blood drained by one of the character's sisters that got drunk and didn't know what she was doing. You get the new Fright Night, which like doesn't take itself seriously still. So this sort of 2000s, 2010s, you get the ironic vampire in which like at least in my opinion, the writers, the directors are trying to kind of play with and make fun of the vampire in certain ways, in like an ironic way, just having fun with the sequels of Blade, right? At a certain point it gets ridiculous. I think there might even be a movie that's like Aliens versus Vampires, or there's like one of those kind of films where it's like vampires versus something, right? This isn't vampires, but you also, what's that film, that British film about zombies? I forget what it's called. Zombieland? No, that's an American film. There's the other one, I forget, where he's like an office worker and there's a zombie apocalypse.
Oh, Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead. So you get all these like ironic, goofy monster depictions where like they're only half serious, but they are playing with the monster archetype.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think by that time, there's this establishment that like these characters exist: Frankenstein, zombies, vampires, werewolves, and we don't have to be so rigidly bound by how they've been depicted or what their abilities are in the past. We can kind of play with it a little bit, because now that we've taken them from their serious depiction in the 80s or their serious depiction in the 20s and 30s, we've kind of broken that down, and now we can have fun with the vampire. And that's what I think Twilight is sort of the culmination of that. That like the vampire can be this handsome, blood-sucking guy that like I think in the third movie you learn that like he was a Civil War general or some shit, and you're like, oh yeah, that's right, vampires are supposed to be super old, but like it's funny, right? So they like kind of make fun of that in certain ways. Anyway, that's my defense of Twilight.
Well, yeah, I mean, because there are so many, and because it's been going on for so long, I think you have to change it up and do something fun every once in a while. It's like if you play in a band and you've been playing the same songs for, years, and people expect you to do that, but you're like, I don't want to keep playing this. I want to do something different. So you got to do something a little bit different. Have you seen 30 Days of Night?
No.
30 Days of Night.
I don't think so.
Is mega creepy, actually. It's the one that takes place, I guess, in like Alaska or somewhere up there in the rim, and where it does get dark for a super long time, actually. And so it's like known amongst the citizens of this little area that like you have to stay inside for 30 days because vampires come out and just like go buck wild. And so it's kind of like an apocalypse style movie where there's like a band of survivors who have to like work together, and they sort of get like picked off one by one, and then there's like the final people that are left.
I haven't seen that one. There's also there's also a John Carpenter
the vampires, yeah.
Yeah, the vampires, which is more about the vampire hunters, I think, than it is about the actual vampires. Which is another thing that we can talk about, because not only are vampires central to the stories, these depictions of vampires, but so are their hunters, their others, the morally pure, scientifically minded Van Helsing, right? Like he's the one that's like, I'm going to straighten this girl out, and I'm going to do it by killing the monster that has wooed her, by killing Dracula. And he knows all the science, right? So he brings the blood transfusion and all that. he sets up the whole like the whole notion that you kill vampires by the stake in the heart and then chop their head off, and that they hate garlic and they hate crosses and yada yada. They're very like Christianized, anti-Christian vampire. But vampire hunters are kind of everywhere in these films too. The John Carpenter one is like a gang of vampire hunters that go after this another bougie vampire guy. But Fright Night, it's the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
The kids are going after the vampire. Also in
Lost Boys?
Lost Boys.
Yeah, that's Corey Feldman, man.
It's kids again. So I guess a long way of saying that the vampire hunters are always supposed to be like the shining white light, the morally pure, the good guys, right? And I wonder what it means if you apply that basic idea, right? If you strip it of Corey Feldman and you look at like it as a frame, as a blueprint, what does his character represent? Innocence, youth, moral fortitude, I guess, maybe Van Helsing, science to a certain extent, science, whether it's like history or whatever. You strip it of that and you look at that and then you think of what does that mean for Marx's metaphor?
So in our metaphor, who would be... Man, these dogs just will not stop making noise. Who would be the vampire hunter or vampire slayer? Would that be Antifa?
That's what I'm saying. So like I'm not going to interpret it. I think it would be us, right? It would be like, but you know, I could also imagine people on the right thinking that like they're the morally pure ones that are going to save the world from vampirism, when in fact it's more likely us, right? The people who are actively fighting the bourgeoisie or fighting aristocrats or just fighting wealth, capital itself, which in Marx's metaphor is the vampire in monetary form, I guess.
Now, I'd like to watch... we watched like 20-something movies, but there are just so many to get through. And I would like to watch other depictions. So there's Ganja and Hess, or The Sweet Blood of Jesus, which are more like black vampires. There's A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which I think is a Middle Eastern depiction. There are a bunch that I would like to see and try to kind of interpret them without like that lens of whiteness.
The Sweet Blood of Jesus, is that a 90s film?
It's Spike Jonze. Spike Jonze. It's not a music video. Spike Jonze.
I would think it would be the 90s, and then in which case it kind of fits into my breakdown of decades.
2014.
Oh, so it's kind of in the... maybe Spike Lee got to Blade 4 and was like, you know what? We need like a better black vampire now.
There are 4 Blade movies too?
I think so. I think there's a lot of them. We haven't watched all of them, obviously. We watched the first one and really liked it and then didn't want to ruin it, so we didn't continue on. They are making a new one though. But yeah, I mean, another thing we could talk about is there are a lot of other lenses that we see vampires in, right? With Vamp and Hunger, for example, and a lot of people have written about this in Gothic literature, that vampires can also represent homosexuals. In the 90s,
like in The Hunger.
That's what I'm saying. In The Hunger, in Vamp, there's some homoeroticism going on there. There also is in Fright Night, the first one, like the vampire guy.
Yeah, it's just 2 dudes living together.
And his familiar, right? They live together, and you know, he's a sexual guy, so you know, maybe he dabbles, maybe he does his thing.
I mean, Interview with a Vampire, 2 dudes.
Interview with a
Vampire. They adopt a little girl.
Definitely some homoeroticism in there, especially the scene when they're in that like beach house or whatever, and they're like, when he turns him into a vampire. I think that's the scene where he turns him into a vampire. Like, you have to you have to suck on the other person in order to become. You have to suck on the vampire in order to become a vampire. So it has homoerotic imagery built into it automatically when you're talking about a male quote vampire turning another quote male vampire into a vampire. There is no homo way to do it. I guess, or actually no, that's not true. Because Lost Boys, right? He just gives them he gives them like a Nalgene bottle and is like, drink up.
That was not even a Nalgene bottle. That was like a fancy silver bottle.
It was an 80s Nalgene bottle. Fancy silver shit.
Okay.
No, it wasn't silver because you could see through it because
it was like glass and silver.
Yeah, he was fucking with his mind, and so when you saw it on the thing, it looked like wine.
Right.
And because he was thinking that it was wine, but of course, it wasn't wine. So yeah, there's like the vampire as homosexual. There's a vampire as non-white, which we actually haven't gotten a lot of, but it's there. It's there in Blade. Because not only is Blade a vampire who hunts primarily white vampires, but he's also the only daywalker. He's like the rare one. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it's easy to make him an other when he's a noticeably different race than everyone else. And even, I mean, obviously everything is centered around whiteness, so that's even why we say stuff like non-white, because whiteness is the standard. Ozzy, for God's sake, man.
He's like, Blade is like the other of the others, in a way, I guess, in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to read the vampire myth, the vampire character, what it represents. It's something that I've loved doing. I've written about it myself. What we haven't talked about is vampires depicted contemporaneously in other cultures. So like I've seen a lot of late Soviet horror films, which is, I will say, the Vampire Family is probably the only vampire movie that I can think of off the top of my head in which the vampires are definitely poor. They're peasants pretty much. But yeah, so there's a lot of ways to read these things. We have that sort of binary that Marx sets up of the bourgeois other that still holds true 100 years later. 200 years later, right?
Yeah, in What We Do in the Shadows, the kind of main guy says, when he's talking about his history, that he got driven out of his country by peasants for being too pillagey.
Anarchists know that peasants are the shit.
Awesome.
Peasants do the shit.
Yes.
Yeah, they're the only ones that really stood up to Stalin, too. Who can also maybe be read as a vampire. Undead. Yeah, so I just wanted to ask before we end this, what is your favorite vampire film?
I mean, I really liked Only Lovers Left Alive. I liked it. I saw it in theaters when it came out several years ago. I've liked it since then. I think it's very much, I think you pointed it out, that it's very much just like my style. It's very me. Just because the kind of references it makes, the kind of humor that it is, and then the kind of focus on the music, which is very much my style of music. I mean, I love Buffy the Vampire. A lot of these just have they're important to me for various reasons. You know, I like The Hunger because Susan Sarandon's boobs. And just lesbian vampires in general is a thing that is wonderful. What's not to love about that? And The Lost Boys is one I've seen about a jillion times, too. So, I don't know if I can necessarily pinpoint one specific favorite other than Only Lovers Left Alive, but I guess I would probably have to say that one. What about you? But also, I haven't seen Vampire in Brooklyn yet. That might end up being my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I still haven't even seen every vampire movie. It is also a hard choice for me. If I am a sucker for the classic Dracula story. I like it, but it's well done. Bram Stoker's, the Francis Ford Coppola film, graphically is well done, but it does still omit a lot that is in the book. Even the 1931 Dracula is like, yeah, and the 70s one also pretty good, but still changes a lot. The 70s one has the ship sailing into the harbor scene down really well, which the Francis Ford Coppola one does not. Which, if you haven't read the book, that's the best scene from the book. So if I had to pick one and ride with it, I would probably say the original Fright Night. Yeah, it's a little bit surprising, only because I think that not only, like, when he shows his true vampiric form, is it scary? Like, his eyes are all, like, beaming and shit like that. He's a scary vampire, even though it's supposed to be kind of like a kid's horror movie. And I like that the kids are the vampire hunters, right? Because, you know...
yeah, with help from the TV guy.
Yeah, and that's another thing worth talking about. That TV guy is supposed to be a parody of these, like, 70s and even maybe the 30s vampires and the 50s vampires that are kind of like... These are actors, right? These are classic Hollywood actors that, like... If you talk to them about vampires, they don't know shit about vampires. They just act. They're just doing this to get paid. And so that old guy in Fright Night, that's what he represents. He's just an actor. He plays this character of like a vampire hunter and shit on TV, but when he encounters a real vampire, he's like, I'm just an actor. I don't know what I'm doing.
Oh, he really believed it, though.
He got it afterwards. Like, it was a lot of resistance, but then he got it. But he was still kind of the biggest coward of the hunters. The kids were like the leading vampire hunters in this. And Fright Night is just kind of scary depiction of a vampire.
It's also super goofy. Very 80s.
Yeah, I love the 80s. I love the 80s.
Fair enough. Well, I will post a list of all of the vampire movies that we watched, as well as some others, on our Instagram, and I can get somebody to do it on the Twitter too, just so that you can follow along with what we were doing, or maybe you just have an interest on your own. We are not experts on this, obviously. It's just an interest, and this follows what I've been talking about on my other episodes about movies with secret radical themes. I'm going to keep doing these because they're fun for me. So if you have any suggestions, feel free to hit me up at PLR Pod on Instagram. I check the messages all the time, got my phone on me all the time, let the government track my ass. And you can tell me what you think about vampire stuff. So thank you, Alex, for joining me. Sorry about all the noises that my dogs were making.
They're trying to get involved. Animals are also others. That's the werewolf, right?
Yes.
Oh!
Do you think Ozzy's really a werewolf?
No.
No.
Sophie is, but not Ozzy. Thanks for having me on. If you liked what you hear, please go to the Patreon page and help us by becoming a backer. For as little as $1 a month, you unlock a bunch of bonus episodes, and you can cancel that whenever you want. So you could just pay $1, get all these episodes, and then just not pay it the next month.
Don't do that.
You can. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but don't.
Don't do it, but you can do that.
But you could, but don't.
And thanks for having me on. I love vampires.
All right. Well, I'm going to go to bed and hopefully not have nightmares.
Them bloodsuckers.
Mm-hmm.
All right.